His sister moved in and destroyed our life together. I told her to leave but my boyfriend chose her and then. I never imagined I'd be posting here, but I'm at a complete loss. I, 32F, have been with my boyfriend, Jake, 34M, for 3 years, and we've lived together for 2. It's been a pretty smooth relationship, until recently, when his sister, Emma, 29F, unexpectedly moved in with us. Now, I'm questioning everything. Emma's always been a bit of a wild card. She's the youngest of 3, and Jake's parents are kind of, let's just say they like to pretend their family is picture perfect. In reality, it's messy, and they've often leaned on Jake to clean up after Emma's messes. Emma's the free spirit type, hopping between jobs, relationships, and cities. There's always some kind of drama following her, but I never had to deal with it too much, until now. 3 weeks ago, Emma showed up at our door with a single suitcase and teary eyes. Jake immediately pulled her into a hug while she sobbed about how her boyfriend kicked her out after a huge fight. I felt bad for her, of course, but I assumed she'd be crashing on our couch for a couple of nights, just until she found somewhere else to stay. Jake didn't say anything different, and I figured it was a given that this was a temporary arrangement. But here we are, weeks later, and Emma is still here, settling into our place like she's paying rent, she's not, and making herself at home. She's taken over our second bedroom, which Jake and I used as an office and a little gym space. She said she needed a mental health sanctuary and redecorated it with plants, tapestries, and a mini fountain she got from God knows where. I wasn't thrilled, but I bit my tongue because I know she's going through a rough time. It's not just that she's physically taken over the space, though. It's her presence, she's always here. Like, always. I work from home, so having someone else in the house all day is a huge adjustment. I've mentioned it to Jake, but he keeps brushing me off, saying she just needs some time. The thing is, Emma's not making any effort to find a new place. She's turned the living room into her personal yoga studio, and every time I try to work out there, she's meditating or doing some intense stretching that leaves no room for me. She's also commandeered our kitchen, experimenting with new recipes, and leaving a mess behind that she doesn't always clean up. Last week, I tried talking to Jake about setting some boundaries, and he just got defensive. He said she's family, and I need to be more understanding. But am I crazy for feeling like this is too much? It's not that I don't want to help her, I do, but this feels more like enabling. Things escalated a few days ago when Emma announced she had a great opportunity and asked Jake if he could lend her $5,000. She's apparently looking into starting a new wellness blog and needs money for a brand coach. I thought Jake would finally put his foot down, but he just told her he'd think about it. I couldn't believe it. We're not exactly rolling in money, and we've been saving for a down payment on a house. I told Jake privately that if he gives her this money, it's coming out of our savings, and we'll have to push back buying our own place. Jake got upset, saying I'm being selfish and not seeing the bigger picture. He accused me of not caring about his family's well-being. I was stunned. It's like he can't see how much this situation is affecting me, or he doesn't want to see it. I told him I'm willing to help Emma get back on her feet, but I can't support just throwing money at her like we're her personal bank. He said I was being harsh, and now things are tense between us. I'm frustrated and feeling pretty unheard, so I decided to talk to Emma myself. I tried to be gentle and explain that while she's welcome to stay for now, we need her to actively look for a job and a place of her own. She got really quiet, and then, no joke, she burst into tears, saying she feels like she's a burden and that she knew I never liked her. I was floored. I don't dislike her, I'm just overwhelmed by her being here without an end date in sight. Now I feel guilty, and Jake's furious at me for making his sister feel unwanted. He hasn't said more than a few words to me since then, and I feel like I'm losing my mind. Am I really being so unreasonable? I want to support Emma, but I also want my home and my life back. I'm at a point where I'm not sure what to do next. I love Jake, and I thought we were on the same page about our future, but this whole situation has made me question whether he's too caught up in his family's drama to prioritize us. Should I give Emma more time, or is it okay to push for a clear exit plan? Is it even worth trying to have another conversation with Jake, or am I being unreasonable in all of this? After my attempt to talk to Emma, things got awkward fast. I tried to give her space, but she's one of those people who seems to thrive on tension, like it fuels her, and she uses it to make everyone around her feel guilty. She's been moping around the apartment, sighing loudly whenever I'm in the same room, and making pointed comments like, I guess I'll just stay out of the way, or don't worry, I won't be a bother much longer. I've been walking on eggshells, trying not to provoke any more drama. Meanwhile, Jake's still barely speaking to me. He leaves the room when I come in and has started taking longer hours at work. When he's home, he spends most of his time with Emma, comforting her or watching TV together in what used to be our evening routine. I've been feeling like an outsider in my own home, sitting alone in the bedroom or kitchen while they laugh and chat in the living room. I thought about asking Jake to go to a cafe so we could talk things through away from the apartment, but it's like he's actively avoiding any serious conversation. The tension finally boiled over 2 nights ago. I was trying to get some work done in the living room when Emma walked in and started playing some kind of guided meditation on full blast, without asking. I politely asked her if she could use headphones since I was working. She gave me a look that could melt steel and muttered, "I just needed to calm down after you know what." When I asked her to clarify, she just shook her head and said, "Forget it, I'm not looking to fight." Something in me snapped. I put down my laptop and asked her outright, "What's the problem, Emma? I've tried being nice, I've tried talking things out, but it feels like nothing I do is right. You're upset, Jake's upset, and I don't know what I'm supposed to do here. Can we just have an honest conversation?" Emma looked genuinely surprised and a little panicked. She stammered for a second and then blurted out, "You are the problem, okay? You've made it clear you don't want me here. You're trying to push me out, and Jake sees it too. You're creating this tension, not me. You." I was speechless for a second. I honestly didn't know how to respond. I tried to explain my side, saying I didn't mind her staying but just wanted her to take some steps toward independence. But she cut me off, saying, "You're always putting me in these impossible situations, making me feel like a failure. I'm trying, but I'm not ready to leave yet, okay?" Before I could respond, Jake walked in. He'd apparently heard the whole thing from the hallway, and instead of backing me up or even asking what was going on, he said, "I think you should leave Emma alone. She's dealing with enough already." His voice was cold, and I could tell he wasn't open to hearing me out. I looked between the two of them, feeling completely outnumbered and hurt. I've never felt so unwelcome in my own home. It was like they were ganging up on me, as if I was some kind of intruder. So I left. I just grabbed my keys and walked out because I knew if I stayed, I'd either cry or scream, and neither of those would help. I drove around aimlessly for a while, feeling so many things at once: anger, frustration, sadness. But the one feeling that overwhelmed me the most was loneliness. I realized I have no one to turn to about this. Most of my friends live out of state now, and my family's not super close. Jake's been my rock for so long, but now I feel like he's slowly slipping away from me. I ended up sitting in my car in a random parking lot for over an hour, just crying and scrolling through old photos of Jake and me on my phone. We used to be so happy: weekend hikes, lazy Sundays watching movies, date nights at our favorite sushi place. I don't know when that all changed. Was it gradual? Did I miss the signs that he's always going to choose his family over me? By the time I got home, it was past midnight. The apartment was dark, and Jake was already asleep, or at least pretending to be. I crawled into bed next to him, careful not to touch him, feeling like I was sharing the bed with a stranger. I didn't sleep much, just kept replaying everything over and over in my head. The next morning, Jake barely looked at me as he got ready for work. I tried to ask him if we could talk later, and he just said, "Not now, I'm late." He kissed me on the forehead out of habit, but it felt empty. Like he was just going through the motions. I feel like I'm losing him. And I don't know how to stop it. Emma's still here, and she's made no mention of moving out. She's actually started talking about adopting a cat to bring some positive energy into the place. I didn't even have the energy to argue about it. I feel like I'm constantly being tested, and no matter what I do, I'm the bad guy. Jake won't talk, Emma won't leave, and I'm starting to wonder if I'm the one who should. But that thought breaks my heart because I still love Jake, and I don't want to walk away from what we've built together. I just want our life back. I want him back. But right now, I don't know if that's even possible. After a few more days of tense silence, I decided I couldn't live like this anymore. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine when it felt like I was slowly being pushed out of my own relationship and my own home. So, I tried again to talk to Jake one evening when he got home from work. "Can we talk?" I asked, standing by the kitchen island, already bracing myself for some kind of rejection. He sighed and nodded, but his eyes looked weary, like he was dreading whatever I had to say. He sat down at the kitchen table, and I joined him, trying to find the right words to start. "Jake, I feel like we're not on the same page anymore," I said softly, choosing my words carefully. "Emma's your sister, and I get that you want to help her, but it's like you've completely shut me out. Every time I try to talk to you about what's going on, you push me away." Jake ran a hand through his hair, looking away. "I'm not shutting you out. I just don't think you understand what Emma's going through. She's at a really low point. And it's not like I'm asking you to do much, just give her some space." "But it's not just about space," I insisted. "It's about respect and boundaries. This is our home, Jake. And right now, it doesn't feel like mine at all. She's taken over every corner, and I don't see her making any effort to move forward. We haven't even had a single conversation about what the plan is. Why does there need to be a plan right now? He snapped, his frustration bubbling to the surface. Can't you just be patient? I'm trying to do the best I can here. I could feel my throat tightening, that familiar sting of tears building up behind my eyes. I willed myself not to cry, not now, not when I needed to make my point clear. It's not that I'm against helping her, Jake. But we need to talk about what happens next. How long is she going to stay? Are we giving her a timeline? Is she looking for work? What's the plan if she doesn't leave? Jake just shook his head, looking exasperated. You're overthinking this. She's family. I can't just kick her out. I'm not asking you to kick her out. I'm asking for a conversation, some transparency. I felt my voice rising, but I couldn't help it. It was like everything that had been building up over the past few weeks was finally spilling out. You're making decisions that affect both of us without even talking to me. You're giving her money, changing our routines, making me feel like I'm the intruder in my own home. Jake was quiet for a long moment, and when he finally spoke, his voice was low and pained. You know, sometimes I wonder if you'll ever understand what it's like to have family you can't just walk away from. You've told me before that your family's not close, and maybe that's why you're having such a hard time with this. His words hit me like a slap to the face. I felt my breath catch as a wave of hurt and anger surged through me. That's not fair, Jake, I whispered, shaking my head. Just because I don't have the same relationship with my family doesn't mean I can't understand. You're using that as an excuse to justify shutting me out. Jake rubbed his face with both hands, looking utterly exhausted. I'm not trying to shut you out. I'm trying to support my sister without making her feel like she's on a countdown. I'm sorry if that makes you uncomfortable, but I can't just turn my back on her. I stared at him, feeling the room close in around me. This wasn't getting us anywhere. Every word out of my mouth just seemed to make things worse. So I took a deep breath and changed tactics. Okay, I get it. You want to help her, I said, my voice trembling despite my best efforts to stay calm. But if this is going to work, if we're going to make this work, there need to be some boundaries. For all of us. She needs to start looking for a job and contributing in some way. Even if it's just helping more around the house. And we need to agree on a realistic timeline for her to move out. Jake looked conflicted, his jaw clenched like he was holding back a dozen things he wanted to say but knew wouldn't help. After what felt like an eternity, he finally nodded. Fine. We'll talk to her. Set some expectations. But I'm not kicking her out, and I'm not putting her on a strict timeline. She'll leave when she's ready. I knew it wasn't exactly what I wanted, but at least it was something. A step in the right direction, I hoped. We called Emma into the kitchen and sat down with her. I tried to keep my tone neutral and calm as I laid out what Jake and I had discussed. Emma listened quietly, but I could see her face getting redder and redder as I talked about contributing more and starting to think about what she needed to do to get back on her feet. When I finally stopped, Emma looked at Jake, her eyes wide and glistening with tears. I thought you were on my side, she said quietly. I am on your side, Jake said gently, reaching out to touch her arm. But this is something we all have to talk about. I want you to feel comfortable here, but this is her home too. Yeah, it's her home, Emma spat, turning her glare on me. And she's been making that pretty clear since day one. I get it. I'm not welcome. You don't want me here. You want me gone. I'll figure it out, okay? My heart sank. It wasn't what I wanted her to feel at all, but I didn't know how to get through to her. Emma, it's not like that. I want you to feel supported, but I also need to feel like we're working toward a solution together. This can't be a permanent arrangement. Emma shook her head, tears now spilling freely. You know what? Don't bother. I'll find somewhere else to stay. I don't need to be somewhere I'm not wanted. With that, she got up and stormed out of the kitchen, leaving me and Jake sitting there in stunned silence. He looked like he wanted to chase after her, but I reached out and touched his arm gently. Jake, let her cool off, I murmured, feeling utterly drained. This conversation was never going to be easy. He just nodded, but his eyes were filled with something that looked a lot like resentment. I don't know if it was directed at me or the situation or both, but it left a sour feeling in my stomach. After Emma slammed the door to her room, I went to bed alone. Jake stayed up for hours, probably talking to her, though I couldn't bring myself to get up and check. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I'd just made things even worse. I woke up the next morning to the sound of hushed voices coming from the living room. My stomach tightened immediately. I knew Jake and Emma were talking, and I wasn't sure I wanted to hear what they were saying, but I also didn't want to hide away in the bedroom like a coward. So, I took a deep breath, threw on a hoodie, and made my way out. They both went silent as I stepped into the room. Emma was sitting cross-legged on the couch, her eyes puffy and red from crying. Jake was leaning against the wall, looking frustrated and drained. Morning, I said softly, trying to keep things neutral. Everything okay? Not really, Emma replied, her voice thick with emotion. Jake and I have been talking, and I think it's clear what I need to do. She looked straight at me as she said it, almost like she was daring me to argue. What's that? I asked cautiously, glancing at Jake. He looked away, avoiding my eyes, which instantly set me on edge. I'm going to leave, she said, lifting her chin defiantly. I'll stay with a friend until I can find my own place. Her words should have made me feel relieved, but they didn't. There was something in her tone that made it clear she wasn't saying this because she wanted to or because she was genuinely ready. It felt more like a last-ditch attempt to paint herself as the victim one last time. Emma, that's not what we... It's fine, she cut me off, shaking her head. I get it. You want your space back. I shouldn't have come here in the first place. I thought I'd be welcome, but I was wrong. Jake flinched at her words, and I could see the guilt flickering in his eyes. That's not fair, he said softly. You are welcome here. You know that? No, I don't, she shot back. Not anymore. She turned to me, her expression hardening. I know you think I've been taking advantage of Jake and just mooching off you guys, but that's not what I wanted. I didn't have anywhere else to go, okay? The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I didn't know what to say. I hadn't meant to make her feel unwanted or like she had no place to turn. I was just trying to protect what little peace and stability Jake and I had left. Emma, it's not that, I said softly, trying to find the right words. I didn't know how to handle all of this. I don't want you to feel like I'm pushing you out, but I also need to know where things are headed. It's not fair to any of us to keep going like this without a plan. Whatever, she muttered, looking away. I'll pack up today and be out by tomorrow. Don't worry about it. Emma, please don't make any rash decisions, Jake pleaded, stepping toward her. We can figure this out. She looked up at him, and I saw something raw and desperate in her eyes. It's not a rash decision, Jake. It's what I need to do. I'm not going to stay where I'm not wanted. You can't fix this for me, and it's time I stopped expecting you to. I could see Jake's resolve cracking. He looked torn between his loyalty to his sister and whatever resentment he'd started to feel toward me. And I realized, with a sinking heart, that this was turning into an ultimatum. It was becoming a choice between me and her, one that I never wanted him to have to make. Emma, I don't want you to go, Jake said finally, his voice breaking. You're my sister. I just want you to be okay. I'll be okay, she whispered, her eyes softening. But I need to figure it out on my own. I'll call a friend today. I'll figure something out. With that, she got up and walked out of the room, leaving me and Jake standing there in heavy silence. He looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw so many emotions swirling in his eyes, anger, guilt, confusion. I hope you're happy, he said bitterly. This is what you wanted, right? For her to leave? His words cut me like a knife. No, Jake. I didn't want it to be like this. I wanted us to have a plan. To feel like we were moving forward. I didn't want to force her out. Well, that's what's happening, he said, his tone icy. And now she's leaving because she thinks she's not welcome here. I hope you can live with that. He walked out of the room before I could respond, and I was left standing there, feeling completely defeated. I had wanted boundaries, not a breakup of his family. But now it seemed like no matter what I did or said, I was going to be the bad guy. Emma spent the rest of the day packing in silence. I tried to offer help a couple of times, but she brushed me off with short, clipped answers. Jake barely spoke to me, staying in the guest room with her most of the day, and I felt more isolated than ever. That night, after Emma went to bed, Jake finally came back into our bedroom. He didn't say anything as he climbed into bed next to me, and the distance between us felt like miles. I'm sorry, I whispered into the darkness, not sure if he was even awake. I never meant for this to happen. I just wanted us to have some control over our own lives. He didn't respond, but I thought I saw him shift slightly, like he was listening. I felt tears welling up again, but I blinked them back, refusing to cry anymore. I didn't know if this was the beginning of the end for us, or if we could somehow rebuild what was broken. The next morning, Emma left. Jake drove her to her friend's place, and I stayed behind, feeling like an intruder in my own home. When he came back, he didn't say much, just mumbled that he needed some time to think. That was 2 days ago. Since then, he's been distant and quiet. We've barely spoken, and I can feel the weight of everything hanging between us, suffocating whatever peace I thought we'd find once Emma left. Now I'm questioning if I did the right thing. Was I too harsh? Should I have just let her stay as long as she needed, even if it meant sacrificing my own comfort? I'm terrified that this has driven a wedge between Jake and me that we'll never be able to get past. So, Reddit, I need some advice. Was I wrong to push for boundaries? Should I have just sucked it up and let Emma stay as long as she needed? How do I repair the damage that's been done to my relationship? The tension in the house has been unbearable since Emma left. Jake and I walk around each other like strangers, exchanging polite nods and forced smiles but nothing else. Every attempt at conversation feels stilted, and I'm starting to wonder if we're both waiting for the other to make the first move, or if we're just too afraid to say what we're really thinking. It took me another sleepless night and way too many glasses of wine to finally decide that I couldn't let things drag on like this. I love Jake, and I need to know if we can find our way back to each other, or if this situation with Emma is the beginning of the end for us. So, yesterday evening, I asked Jake if we could go for a walk, somewhere away from the apartment and its lingering memories of arguments and unspoken resentment. He hesitated, but then he agreed. We ended up at a small park nearby, the autumn air crisp and cool, the leaves crunching under our feet as we walked side by side in silence for what felt like forever. Finally, I couldn't stand it anymore. I stopped walking and turned to face him. "Jake, we need to talk," I said softly, my voice almost lost in the breeze. "We can't keep doing this, acting like we're strangers. If you're angry at me, just say it. If you want to blame me for what happened with Emma, go ahead. But we have to talk about it." Jake looked down at the ground, his jaw clenched. I could see the struggle in his eyes, the way he was trying to hold back whatever was boiling inside him. "I'm not angry," he said quietly, but the tightness in his voice said otherwise. "I'm just disappointed." The word hit me like a punch to the gut. Disappointed. It felt worse than anger because it meant that I'd somehow let him down, failed him in a way that couldn't be fixed with a simple apology. "I didn't want things to turn out like this," I said, my voice breaking. "I wanted us to have boundaries, to protect what we've built together, but I never wanted to push Emma away. I know it's my fault she left, and I'm sorry. I truly am. But I couldn't keep living like that, Jake. I felt like I was losing myself in all of this." Jake sighed and looked up at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of pain and something else, something softer, like understanding. "I know," he murmured. "I get it. I know it was hard for you, and I know I put you in an impossible position. But she's my sister, and I've always felt like I had to take care of her. That's just how it's always been. And you shouldn't have to choose between us," I whispered, stepping closer to him. "I never wanted to make you feel like you had to pick sides. But, Jake, we can't have a life together if every time someone in your family needs something, I'm the one who ends up sacrificing everything. We have to be a team." He nodded slowly, his gaze dropping to the ground again. "You're right," he admitted, and his voice was laced with regret. "I guess I just didn't realize how much I was letting Emma's problems affect us. I thought I was doing the right thing by supporting her, but I didn't see what it was doing to you, to us. I want to be there for you, and I want to help your family too, but there has to be balance," I continued, choosing my words carefully. "We need to talk about these things together. Make decisions together." I felt like you were shutting me out, and it hurt. It made me feel like my voice didn't matter. Jake looked up, and I could see the anguish in his expression. "Your voice does matter," he said softly. "I know I haven't shown it lately, but it does. I don't want to lose you, but I didn't know how to fix things. I felt trapped between you and Emma, and I didn't know how to handle it." We stood there in silence for a moment, just letting his words hang in the air. I felt a small flicker of hope, a tiny glimmer that maybe, just maybe, we could find our way through this. "So where do we go from here?" I asked tentatively. "How do we fix this?" Jake took a deep breath, his shoulders sagging as if he was finally letting go of a heavy burden. "I think we need to start by being honest with each other about what we want and need," he said. "If we're going to make this work, I need to be more open with you, and I need to put us first. I can't keep letting my family's problems dictate our relationship, and I'll try to be more understanding," I promised, reaching out to take his hand. "I'll support you when it comes to your family, but I also need you to be open with me. We're supposed to be partners, Jake. We can't keep acting like it's you and your family on one side and me on the other." Jake squeezed my hand gently, and for the first time in what felt like weeks, I saw a hint of a smile on his face. "You're right. We need to be a team. I'm sorry for everything that's happened. I'll talk to Emma and make sure she knows she's welcome back, but not as a permanent solution. And only if we're both okay with it." It was a small victory, but it felt huge. He was acknowledging that we both had a say in what happened next. That we both mattered. "I appreciate that," I said, feeling some of the tension in my chest begin to ease. "I'm not saying she can never come back, but it has to be different. We have to be on the same page." Jake nodded, his gaze steady. "We will be. I promise. And, thank you for being patient with me. I know I've been difficult lately, but I'm willing to work on it." On us, we ended up walking a little more, just talking and reconnecting. By the time we got back to the apartment, it felt like a weight had been lifted. We still had a lot of work to do, and I knew things wouldn't change overnight, but it was a start. For the first time in weeks, I felt like there was hope for us. Later that night, as we lay in bed together, I rested my head on his chest and listened to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. We didn't need to say anything more, just being close was enough. And as I drifted off to sleep, I knew we were going to be okay. Emma texted Jake the next morning, saying she was staying with a friend for now and that she needed some space to figure things out on her own. It wasn't a perfect resolution, but it was better than I'd expected. I hope that, eventually, we can all sit down and talk again, without the hurt, without the anger. It's not the ending I imagined when all of this started, but it's a new beginning. And sometimes, that's enough.